Guys, there's a couple of stories out there right now that are pretty important but are not receiving much attention. First of all, you've got this one from the Times of San Diego about California's big three utilities claiming that they're going to be cutting power during fire weather. That's pretty crazy. Also, you've got this assessment of damage to the U.S. energy grid after the first cyber attack that they recorded. And then, of course, we had the North Korean missile test that took place very recently. Just because they're not being talked about much doesn't mean they're not important. We should definitely be paying attention. You need to ask yourself a question. If the power went out for a couple weeks, or if your credit card could no longer be used, would you be able to feed your family? If the answer is no, then it's definitely time to act. I'm prepared, and I use my Patriot Supply for my emergency food supply, and I think you should too. You can start with a 2-week emergency food kit. You can order them for a limited time. It's a low price, and you'll save $62 when you go to my special website. It's www.preparewithredpill78.com. These kits include breakfasts, lunches, and dinners, and they last up to 25 years in storage. You know when it's breaking news, it's too late to prepare. You can do this now and get your emergency food from My Patriot Supply at preparewithredpill78.com. That's preparewithredpill78.com. You're listening to Red Pill 78. I am the corruption detector, and this is your Red Pill News. Well, we know that Sean Hannity has the best sources. He is one of the few people on the mainstream media news that we know that we can actually trust. Not only because we've been told by our favorite Anon, but we know because we've seen it time and time again. Sean Hannity is someone with integrity, someone who delivers the news as it is actually happening. Now, last night, Sean Hannity said some things about the Democrats. He says they're going to be hit so hard with a spying scandal, their newsrooms will be shaking. And we know that the newsrooms of the mainstream media are the propaganda arm of the Democratic Party. Well, for the past year, Fox News host Sean Hannity has been investigating and reporting on the previous administration's deep state spying on the Trump campaign in the 2016 election. Sean and his guests, including Greg Jarrett, Sarah Carter, John Solomon, and many others, have pieced together the largest political scandal in modern U.S. history. The former administration used all of the power of government to spy on and entrap Trump campaign officials. Unfortunately for the left, during this same time, they were listening to the anti-Trump fake news media and saw one Russia collusion conspiracy after another unravel during the same time period. On Monday, Sean Hannity warned the Democrats are going to be hit so hard by the former administration's spying scandal that their newsrooms will be shaking at the foundation. Let's go ahead and take a listen to this clip with Sarah A. Carter.
Why did you disable this presidency to some extent and put the nation through the trauma of the collusion hoax?
Why the biased team of investigators?
Yes, absolutely.
And why do you ignore the dirty dossier?
Absolutely.
Exactly.
And, you know, there's so much in his report that he's going to need to justify. Why didn't he look into Hillary Clinton paying for the dossier?
Oh, the New York Times says it might be Russian disinformation.
Yes.
Sarah, last 15. It's all yours.
Look, it's going to be an avalanche of information. The only way for any of this to be rectified is for the Attorney General Barr to have his say, to be able to investigate this and to move on from the Russia conspiracy hoax theory and move on to what really was happening. And that was an investigation, a weaponization of the intelligence community into the president to unseat a duly elected president of the United States.
Notice they're clinging to their lie and their own conspiracy theory, and they have no idea the media and Democrats are going to be hit so hard with that avalanche that literally their newsrooms will be shaking to its foundation, that they're not going to be able to handle it, and the mass psychosis continues. Thank you both. Hillary Clinton.
I love how when Sarah Carter and Sean Hannity both used the term avalanche, there was just the hint of a corner turn on the smile on their mouths. They just started to smile just a little bit more. And even Greg Jarrett had that look on his face like, yep, this is definitely going to be an avalanche. D5, my friends. So Before we go on to the next story, I just wanted to say I hope you guys like this new format on my screen. I discovered Reader View in Safari, which allows me to show the stories without actually showing the ads. So very cool. Hopefully for those of you who were distracted by the ads, will no longer find it necessary to worry about it. So thank you very much for watching. On to the next. Well, Christopher Wray testified in Congress, and he directly contradicted his boss, Bill Barr. He said there's no evidence of spying. What? Swamp Creature, FBI Director Chris Wray, and FBI brass have yet to condemn the former administration's spying on the opposition party during the 2016 election, because it was a huge deal, and I can't believe they have not at least admitted it. The FBI sent several undercover agents to infiltrate the campaign and entrap Trump campaign officials in nefarious acts. The liberal mainstream media is just starting to admit this happened during the election. It is still not clear how many deep state FBI plants were used to entrap Trump campaign officials. Chris Wray knows, but is not ready to condemn the FBI practice. Apparently, the current leadership at the FBI believes it is an acceptable practice to spy on Republican candidates and their staff. How could they? Well, on Tuesday, Chris Wray told the Senate Appropriations Committee that Bill Barr's use of the word spying to describe the spying on the Trump campaign and administration was not the term I would use. Really, Chris, what's the term you'd use? Let's take a listen to this clip here from ABC News. So, Chris, what do you call it when you're conducting a counterintelligence operation on anyone to gather information without them knowing? Well, I think that if you look up the definition of spying in the dictionary, you'd find something along those lines. Now, spying does not connotate some type of illegal idea. We maintain spies in our government. Our intelligence community is full of them. Spying is what they do, regardless of who they conduct the act against. Wray also told the committee that he has no evidence of that former administration spying on Trump. Let's go ahead and take a listen to that.
And as part of the investigative process, do FBI agents secure warrants for relevant evidence?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the question?
Yes, as part of an investigative process, like the investigative process into the 2016 presidential campaign, do FBI agents secure warrants for relevant evidence?
Certainly, securing warrants is a very important step that we take every day in the FBI in lots and lots of investigations.
So I would take that as a yes. Did FBI agents get warrants for information as part of their counter-surveillance investigation into Russian interference in the 2016 election?
Well, I want to be a little bit careful about what I can discuss here, but I think it's been publicly disclosed that there were a number of relevant warrants that were secured in the course of that investigation.
Thank you. And do you believe, Director Wray, that the FBI and its agents spied into the 2016 presidential campaign operation?
Well, again, I want to be careful about how I answer that question here because there is an ongoing Inspector General investigation. I have my own thoughts based on limited information I've seen so far, but I don't think it would be ripe or appropriate for me to share those at this stage because I really do think it's important for everybody to respect the independent Inspector General's investigation, which I think this line of questioning starts to implicate, and I think it's very important for everybody to be able to have full confidence in his review.
And at this time, do you have any evidence that any illegal surveillance into the campaigns or individuals associated with the campaigns by the FBI occurred?
I don't think I personally have any evidence of that sort.
So just for anyone who's still on the fence about it, a spy is one who secretly collects information concerning the enemies of a government or group. The Trump campaign was certainly the enemies of the former administration and the assumed incoming administration. Now, a spy is also one who secretly keeps watch on another or others. The president and his team were being watched and kept tabs by the spies in our own government. Spying is the activity of trying to obtain secret information from rival countries, organizations, companies, etc. So this is exactly the definition of spying. The Trump campaign, President Trump, the people around him, they were spied upon. And it is ridiculous for anyone in our government to try to confuse that issue. This was most certainly spying of the highest order. I want to thank my friend Mr. W for sending this article over from The Hill at the 11th hour in my recording process. It's entitled, James Comey is in Trouble and He Knows It. James Comey's planet is getting noticeably warmer. Attorney General William Barr's emissions are the suspected cause. Barr has made plain that he intends to examine carefully how and why Comey, as FBI director, decided that the Bureau should investigate 2 presidential campaigns, and if in doing so any rules or laws were broken. In light of this, the fired former FBI director apparently has decided that photos of him on Twitter standing amid tall trees and in the middle of empty country roads acting all metaphysical is no longer a sufficient strategy. No, Comey has realized, probably too late, that he has to try to counter more directly the narrative being set up by the unsparing Attorney General, whose words in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee last week landed in the Trump opposition world like holy water on Linda Blair. Shrieking heads haven't stopped spinning since. And so we've seen Comey get real busy lately. First, he penned a curious op-ed in the New York Times. Then, a Times reporter with whom Comey has cooperated in the past wrote a news article exposing an early controversial investigative technique against the Trump campaign in an attempt to get out front and excuse it. Next, Comey is scheduled to be encouraged on a friendly cable news town hall. In the op-ed, Comey trotted out his now familiar St. James shtick, freely pronouncing on the morality of others. He seems himself as a kind of pontiff on the Potomac working his beads, but comes across more like an unraveling Captain Queeg working his ball bearings. Comey adjudged the president as amoral. He declared the Attorney General to be formidable but lacking inner strength, unlike, the inference is clear, Comey himself. A strategy of insulting the executioner right before he swings his axe is an odd one, but then Comey has a long record of odd decisions and questionable judgment. Amoral leaders, referring to the president, have a way of revealing the character of those around him, Comey wrote, without a hint of irony or self-awareness. Those whom the former FBI director assembled around him probably rue the day they ever met the man. Most are now fired or disgraced for appalling behaviors that Comey found easy to manipulate to advance his decisions. Then, just to make sure his op-ed was odd-salted to the max, Comey mused that the president eats your soul in small bites. Okay, let's step back for a moment. James Comey appears to be in trouble. His strange, desperate statements and behaviors betray his nervousness and apprehension. In a way, it's hard to watch. Comey will claim that everything he did in the FBI was by the book, but after the investigations by Department of Justice Inspector General Michael Horowitz and U.S. Attorney John Huber, along with Barr's promised examination, are completed, Comey's mishandling of the FBI and legal processes likely will be fully exposed. Ideally, Barr's examinations will aggregate information that addresses 3 primary streams. The first will be whether the investigations into both presidential nominees and the Trump campaign were adequately, in Barr's words, predicated. This means he will examine whether there was sufficient justification under existing guidelines for the FBI to have started an investigation in the first place. The Mueller report's conclusions make this a fair question for the counterintelligence investigation of the Trump campaign. Comey's own pronouncement that the Clinton email case was unprosecutable makes it a fair question for that investigation. The second will be whether Comey's team obeyed long-established investigative guidelines while conducting the investigations, and specifically, if there was sufficient truthful justification to lawfully conduct electronic surveillance on an American citizen. The third will be an examination of whether Comey was unduly influenced by political agendas emanating from the previous White House and its Director of National Intelligence, Clowns in America Director, and Attorney General. This, above all, is what's causing the 360-degree head spins. There are early indicators that troubling behaviors may have occurred in all 3 scenarios. Barr will want to zero in on a particular area of concern: the use by the FBI of confidential human sources, whether its own or those offered up by the then Clowns in America director. Without diving into the weeds, it's important to understand that FBI counterintelligence investigations generally proceed sequentially from what is called a preliminary investigation or inquiry to a full investigation. To move from a PI to an FI requires substantial information, predication, indicating investigative targets acted as agents of a foreign power. This is problematic for Comey in light of Mueller's findings. There are strict guidelines governing when the FBI can task a confidential source or a government undercover operative to collect against a U.S. citizen. Normally, this is restricted to a full investigation, and normally restricted to the United States, not overseas. There is a sense that Comey's team was not checking the boxes, did not have adequate predication, and may have tasked sources before an investigation was even officially opened. Barr should pull case files and dig in on this. In addition, the cast of characters leveraged by the FBI against the Trump campaign all appear to have their genesis as clowns in America sources, assets in agency vernacular, shared at times with the FBI. From Stefan Halper and possibly Joseph Mifsud to Christopher Steele to Carter Page himself, and now a mysterious government investigator posing as Halper's assistant and cited in the New York Times article, legitimate questions arise as to whether Comey was manipulated into furthering a Clowns in America political operation more than an FBI counterintelligence case. Some in the media have suggested that the Times article was an attempt by the FBI to justify its early confidential source actions, but current FBI Director Christopher Wray has shown that he would like to excise the cancerous tumor that grew during Comey's time and not just keep smoking. It's hard to imagine current FBI executives trying to justify past malfeasance. James Comey is right to be apprehensive. He himself ate away at the soul of the FBI, not in small bites, but in dangerously large ones. It was a dinner for one, though. His actions are not indicative of the real FBI. The Attorney General's comprehensive examination is welcome, and if done honestly and dispassionately, it will protect future presidential candidates of both parties and redeem the valuable soul of the FBI. It's no wonder that Christopher Wray doesn't want to talk about this very openly. This is a stench hanging over the head of the FBI, and although they have the ability to redeem themselves, it's going to take a lot of hard work and lots of investigative action. And in truth be told, all they need to do is take a look at the records of these investigations, and it'll tell them quite honestly and openly whether or not any of this was predicated, or if they acted outside the guidelines. And I think it's pretty obvious that they did, in fact, act outside those guidelines. Right now, the FBI must be redeemed, or else we run the risk of completely compromising the investigative arm of the Department of Justice. The FBI is the police force for America in a manner of speaking, and without it, we leave ourselves at great risk of future horrible, terrible things taking place. Christopher Wray has a very difficult job ahead of him, but I think that given the right tools and a certain amount of personal honesty, I think that he'll be able to accomplish the job. Now, with Bill Barr there leading the Department of Justice, I think that the chances are even better. Now, on that note, remember last month when former top spy James Clapper said Bill Barr's accusations of spying was stunning and scary? Well, yesterday, Clapper admitted that it was true, and we have video. On April 10th, 2019, Attorney General Bill Barr said he would scrutinize the FBI's investigation of the Trump campaign's ties to Russia, including whether spying was conducted by American intelligence agencies during the 2016 election on the Donald Trump campaign. Democrats and their liberal media immediately suffered a complete meltdown after the Attorney General's outrageous accusations. Well, former Director of National Intelligence, top spy, and Trump basher James Clapper told CNN at the time he was amazed and it was stunning and scary. Let's hear that clip.
When you heard what the Attorney General said today, that spying did occur in the president's campaign, I'm wondering what your reaction was.
Well, I thought it was both stunning and scary. I was amazed at that and rather disappointed that the Attorney General would say such a thing. That, you know, the term spying has all kinds of negative connotations, and I have to believe he chose that term deliberately. And I think it's incredible that if he has concerns, he could easily have, on his first day on the job after his confirmation, asked his own IG, the Inspector General of the Department of Justice, for a briefing on his preliminary findings in the course of his investigation, that is the IG's investigation, into whether there was any wrongdoing by the FBI. And I think it would have been far more appropriate for him to just defer to that investigation rather than postulating with apparently no evidence. He just has a feeling that there was spying against the campaign. One other big point here I would want to make to you, Anderson, is we're losing sight here of what started all this, and that was the Russian meddling, the Russian interference in our election process. And the Russians pose a profound threat to this country. And based on the success that they enjoyed as a result of their meddling in the 2016 election, they're going to continue that. And we're not focusing on that. And we're focusing on this circus about, whether or not somebody was spying on the campaign, which is, I think, a gross misstatement.
As you said, he has access to. He's the Attorney General. He has access to all the information at the Department of Justice.
Yeah, exactly. He didn't fall off the turnip truck yesterday. He's already been the Attorney General. So it's not like he had to walk in the Department of Justice and say, hey, what's this outfit do? He already knew that. So he could easily hit the ground running.
So is this just appealing to the president?
If he had concerns about the conduct of the investigation, the counterintelligence investigation, he could certainly find out about it very early, his first week on the job, and not publicly muse about it in a hearing as he did today.
So first of all, we know that this did not start with the Russians meddling in our election. It was known to the former administration, and they specifically chose not to do something about it. Why? Because they knew that they could use this excuse to entrap the incoming administration and hopefully remove him at a later date. Now, second, of course, Attorney General Bill Barr has access to all the intelligence and information at his disposal as the head of the Justice Department, which lends even more credence to the idea that the Trump campaign and administration were spied upon. We also know that James Clapper is an unreliable witness, so therefore, pretty much anything he says can be thrown down the garbage chute. Then the New York Times broke the news on Friday that the former administration was spying on George Papadopoulos. On Monday, James Clapper told CNN that, well, yeah, I guess that meets the dictionary definition of spying. And here it is, actually. This is what I just read off. Let's go ahead and listen to Clapper finally admit it. Never trust this deep state hack.
History, because sometimes those don't turn out so well.
The president today praised the New York Times for a front page story, as he notes, that there was an undercover FBI investigator who met with a Trump campaign official, George Papadopoulos. The president views this as spying. The attorney general says this is being looked at. Do you think the Justice Department Inspector General will find anything inappropriate on the part of the FBI or the U.S. intelligence community as far as this is concerned?
Well, I don't know, but I will say that using undercover agents is a standard and legitimate technique that is widely used in investigations. That technique has been used to thwart a lot of counterterrorism plots in this country. So I'm sure, there are protocols and standards for using an agent, and I'm sure that's the case here.
So you're saying this was not done lightly?
Well, no, it's never done lightly.
Was it spying?
Well, I guess it meets the dictionary definition of surveillance or spying, a term I don't particularly like. It's not a term of art used by intelligence people. It has a negative connotation of a rogue operation, out of control, not in compliance with the law, and that's not the case at all.
General Clapper, thanks so much for coming in.
Thanks, Wolf.
Coming up...
Well, Jim Clapper, thanks for clearing that up for us. Now, just because you don't like the word spying doesn't mean that isn't what took place. James Clapper finally admitting that the Trump campaign was spied upon, at least admitting that George Papadopoulos, who was a part of the Trump campaign, was spied upon. Now, we are convinced that this goes much farther than they are willing to admit. How many other spies do you think were sent into the Trump campaign? How many other people were spied upon? We also know that from FISA umbrella surveillance, the entire Trump campaign, virtually the entire Trump campaign, and many people in these campaign workers' personal lives were most likely spied upon. The question now becomes, who is going to pay the price? All right, guys. So here, I want to show this little clip from a Judicial Watch interview with John Solomon. It's something that has been touched upon previously in an interview with Mark Levin, but he goes into much greater detail here, and I think that it is extremely important. So let's take a listen.
Collusion narrative, investigating all of Spygate and everything that's been going on. When did you first notice something was wrong?
It's funny. I was back in March of 2017. The Russia story was at that point sort of raging for a couple of months, and there was a filing in the FISA court. Very rare to have a public filing in the FISA court, and so it said at the end of the Obama administration, the NSA, FBI walked in scores, if not hundreds, if I recall correctly, of violations, that there were spy violations going on, specifically affecting the Americans' privacy. And I had not seen a filing like this in a long time. I watched the FISA court a lot. It was very harsh in its assessment, and it was very broad in the scope of violations. And most importantly, there was a significant suggestion that some of this occurred during the 2016 election. So I wrote a series of stories. I came off Hannity one night talking about that story, and I pull into my driveway, and there are two blue government sedans sitting in front of my mailbox, like 11 o'clock at night. I pull in the driveway, guys get out of the car, kind of figure there's something up, and they approach me and say, "You John Solomon?" I said, "I am." I said, "Well, we just saw you on television. We want to talk to you for a second. You're on the cusp of something much bigger, and we can't tell you much because most of the information is classified. What we can tell you is that if you dig far enough, you will find that the U.S. intelligence community, the FBI, NSA, were used to carry out a political opposition research project during the 2016 election. We're deeply troubled by that. It's inappropriate. There are violations yet to be discovered. And more importantly, the reason we want to come and tell you and hope you can report this out is that if we lose these tools, because we're caught using them for politics, we might not catch the next terrorist, we might not catch the next big spy. It deeply concerns us to see what happened. We can't say anything more than that except go get them." And so I had this weird interlude in the driveway. I went home, went inside the house, quickly typed up everything I could remember from the conversation, sent it to my colleague at the time, Sarah Carter, and we began reporting out, could there have been a political dirty trick? Could the U.S. intelligence community have been involved? Who was involved? What politics was involved? Was it Trump? Is it Clinton? We don't know yet. Mm-hmm. And over time, we began to connect these various ligaments and tissues to a very large skeleton. And that skeleton was the FBI was used to carry out basically a political dirty trick on Donald Trump, and to create the illusion that there was this collusion going on when in fact almost everybody in the intelligence community that was not politicized thought this was very thin, if not inappropriate investigation. And little by little, then the Steele dossier came out. Then through the great work of Judicial Watch and other transparency advocates, and through people like Jim Jordan, Mark Meadows, Chuck Grassley, Devin Nunes, we began to see the confines of a real scandal. And the scandal wasn't that Russia and Trump had colluded. It was that the Democratic National Committee, Hillary Clinton, their researchers, their British intelligence operative was colluding with the intelligence agencies to try to create the appearance of such a collusion scandal on the other side. Deeply troubling. And at the beginning, very few people really paid attention to what we were reporting. But over time, and now that the Mueller report has basically put a fork in the idea that there was collusion, people are looking back with eyes and looking at the reporting myself and Sarah and many other people have done, and realizing that maybe the media and the intelligence community were taken for a political ride.
He was told by people directly involved in the government, by people at the highest order with high security clearances, that this tool was used inappropriately and that he needed to continue looking to expose the truth of what was going on. Now, what group do you think those people were involved with? I'm going to leave that up to you guys to decide, but I've already stated on this channel before who I think has been speaking to John Solomon. I believe that he has been in contact with the team around the president and our favorite Anon since the very beginning, as he just admitted. These tools need to be used with the utmost respect and care. We give them to our leaders so that they can use them to catch the bad guys, not to spy on average American citizens or political opponents. We've said before that this is bigger than Watergate. This is way bigger than anything anyone can possibly imagine. The tools of the U.S. government were used in a manner in which is so inappropriate, it can never happen again. Because people like John Solomon, people like yourself, people like me, we are spreading this message because this is so incredibly important to the integrity of our system here in America. Our government cannot be using these tools to spy on average citizens or to spy on people that they simply disagree with. We have to continue watching, we have to continue reporting, because if this is ever allowed to happen again, then we risk the very future and fabric of our great society. America will be no more, and we will truly be living in 1984. Quick little tweet from Paul Sperry here. He says that congressional investigators are looking into a number of false statements made by Mueller in Volume 1 of his report, where he misrepresented the underlying evidence, ostensibly to mirror the FBI's stated pretext for opening investigations on Trump campaign figures. So this is obviously something that we're going to want to be keeping a close eye on. Well, it looks like the president might finally be exerting executive privilege because the White House has instructed former counsel Don McGahn to withhold subpoena docs from the House Dems. Here is Don McGahn right here. And White House counsel Pat Cipollone has instructed former White House counsel Don McGahn not to comply with a congressional subpoena. Cipollone wrote a letter to McGahn's lawyer, William Burke, instructing McGahn to withhold subpoena documents from the Dem-controlled House Judiciary Committee. Mr. Cipollone also argued that President Trump has the right to invoke executive privilege. The White House records remain subject to the control of the White House for all purposes. The White House records remain legally protected from disclosure under long-standing constitutional principles because they implicate significant executive branch confidentiality interests and executive privilege, Cipollone wrote. Here is the letter itself. I write, per your request, in reference to a subpoena issued to your client, Don F. McGahn, by the Committee of the Judiciary of the House United States of Representatives on April 22nd. For all these reasons, the acting chief of staff to the president, Mick Mulvaney, directs Mr. McGahn not to produce these White House records in response to the committee's April 22nd subpoena. The Department of Justice is aware of and concurs with this legal position. And the part I skipped in the middle was the part that I already read. ABC News also obtained a separate letter Cipollone wrote to lawmakers on Tuesday where he argued that McGahn does not have the legal right to disclose these documents to third parties and asks that instead of directing the request for documents to McGahn's attorney, the committee direct the request to the White House. And House Judiciary Chairman Jerry Nadler last month subpoenaed former White House counsel Don McGahn to publicly testify this month. Nadler said that Don McGahn is a critical witness to many of the alleged instances of obstruction of justice and other misconduct described in the special counsel's report. McGahn cooperated and gave over 30 hours of testimony to the special counsel's team. According to Mueller's report, President Trump asked Don McGahn to supposedly lie about reports that he ordered him to fire Mueller. Mueller was never even fired, and Trump insists he never said anything like that to McGahn, but Nadler and the Dems are pushing him anyway. The special counsel's report, even in redacted form, outlines substantial evidence that President Trump engaged in obstruction and other abuses, Nadler said. It now falls to Congress to determine for itself the full scope of the misconduct and to decide what steps to take in the exercise of our duties of oversight, legislation, and constitutional accountability. That's an interesting phrase right there that Jerry Nadler has completely been lost on. Constitutional accountability. Mr. McGahn was requested to appear before the House Judiciary Committee on May 21st with a May 7th deadline to provide the panel with documents related to Mueller's probe. Looks like Jerry Nadler's just going to have to go ahead and go to bed crying because he's not going to get the information that he wants. If he wanted to learn about executive privilege and constitutional accountability, he could just look to the former administration, who was notorious for withholding records on a variety of subjects and also flaunting their constitutional accountability. It's very interesting that Jerry Nadler and the House Dems are just only now so concerned with holding people accountable when the former administrations got away with practically doing the exact opposite. Now, I haven't spoken about this yet, but over the weekend, there were several conservative voices in the truth movement that were silenced. They were kicked off of Facebook, and, this is just, another in a long series of instances such as this. But NBC hack Ben Collins cheered the banning of conservatives on social media, and then he spread lies and fake news about Lauren Southern. And this is Ben Collins. He's an NBC contributor and a committed leftist. His Twitter account is awash with anti-conservative attacks. He openly cheers the silencing of opposing voices in America today, and he mocks their pain. He says right here, these poor oppressed martyrs. Laura Loomer has raised $67,142 on being banned from Instagram. Now work if you can get it. Nice work if you can get it. So yeah, it wasn't just Facebook, it was Instagram because they're owned by the same company. Ben believes the First Amendment is outdated. This is him again right here. Last week, Ben and several liberal media hacks cheered after Facebook banned Paul Joseph Watson, Laura Loomer, AJ, InfoWars, and Louis Farrakhan. This is from Tucker Carlson Tonight. Let's go ahead and look at this.
Keep in mind that nobody voted for Mark Zuckerberg. He's 34 years old. He's completely cut off from reality. He's worth $72 billion. And yet he can single-handedly make our First Amendment irrelevant after 250 years. Here's the most amazing thing of all. Our media think that's great. Now, journalists are supposed to defend free speech. You would think that was their job since they make a living from it. But when corporate America issues an order, when Mark Zuckerberg says jump, their question is, how high, Mr. Zuckerberg? Listen to them celebrate Mark Zuckerberg and sell you out completely.
Why are they doing this now?
Well, it's a good question as to why they waited this long, but
yes, exactly.
Yeah, I mean, so Alex Jones has been banned from Facebook for a long period of time, but now they banned him. They banned his little underling, Paul Joseph Watson.
Now that they kicked them off the platform, that's great for now, but it doesn't roll back the clock.
Well, you have also excesses in the First Amendment and the Second Amendment right now. You know, I don't think that the forefathers said, well, you can say, all sorts of hateful things and spread it around the world, literally spread it through the internet.
I have no issue with it at all. I want them shut down. I want them silenced. I want them muted. I think they are horrible for our society.
I want them shut down. I want them silenced. I want them muted. But don't worry. These people aren't terrifying or anything.
Ana Navarro is a particularly repugnant person. On Saturday, President Trump even tweeted about it, about his disapproval of Facebook and Twitter's censoring of conservative voices. President Trump tweeted Paul Joseph Watson, who never broke any Facebook rules that he knows of, and conservative filmmaker Lauren Southern. This upsets Ben Collins. Ben was outraged. How dare the president defend conservative voices who are targeted by the tech giants? Ben Collins then accused President Trump of retweeting a white nationalist who once shot road flares out of a boat toward immigrants trying to enter Europe. Ben was talking about Lauren Southern. It was a lie, of course. That never happened. It was more fake news from NBC. Lauren Southern corrected the NBC hack. Hi, Ben. I'm not a WN, and I never shot road flares out of a boat at immigrants. You'd think working for NBC, you'd take at least a minute to fact-check a claim that ridiculous. This is why no one trusts the mainstream media. Will you have a shred of dignity and delete this lie? Ben Collins refuses to apologize, even though it's clear he spewed a vicious lie about Lauren. Lauren said, "Cool, a very biased Washington Post opinion piece that says nothing about me firing flares at immigrants?" He says, "No problem. You can Google the boats run by the groups you're on and or fundraise for all night. Have a nice night." Ben wants conservatives banned for hate and fake news, but when he posts fake news, he won't even apologize, and he wonders why Americans don't trust the liberal media. It is no wonder why Americans don't trust the liberal media. It's because they spew hate and lies on a daily basis. They care only about their own opinions, and they don't want a variety of people speaking out on any number of subjects. The approved narrative, theirs, is the only one that they think people should be able to ever hear. Now, wonderful news, you guys. President Trump has pardoned Army Ranger First Lieutenant Michael Behenna. He was sentenced to prison for killing an AQ operative. On March 20th, 2009, Army Ranger First Lieutenant Michael Behenna was sentenced to 25 years in prison for killing a man named Ali Mansour, a known AQ operative while serving in Iraq. Mansour was known to be a member of an AQ cell operating in the lieutenant's area of operation, and Army intelligence believed he organized an attack on Lieutenant Behenna's platoon in April 2008, which killed 2 U.S. soldiers and injured 2 more. Army intelligence ordered the release of Mansour, and Lieutenant Behenna was ordered to return the terrorist access to his home. During the return of Mansour, Lieutenant Behenna again questioned the AQ member for information about other members of the cell and financial supporters. During this interrogation, Mansour attacked Lieutenant Behenna, who killed the insurgent in self-defense. The government subsequently prosecuted Lieutenant Behenna for premeditated murder. In 2014, Michael Behenna was offered parole after serving 5 years for the killing of the AQ operative in 2008. Behenna was serving a 15-year sentence in a military prison at Fort Leavenworth. On Monday, while out with his mother, First Lieutenant Behenna got a call from President Donald Trump, who pardoned him. As military advocate Beverly Pearlson said, "What joyous news. Finally, the good soldier who fought for his country and protected his brothers receives recognition from his commander-in-chief that he is a good soldier and a free man and finally able to enjoy all the freedoms he sacrificed and fought to provide for all of us. This was only possible because of the man who sits in the White House today." It is incredible to see President Trump pardoning real Americans, people who were in prison unjustly, who did nothing wrong. This man protected his country, his platoon, and he protected his own life. He has every right in the world to do that. And the fact that he was ever imprisoned is simply disgusting. God bless President Trump, God bless America, and God bless the United States military. It's also very, very refreshing to see President Trump doing these pardons in, the beginning of his presidency, rather than waiting till the 11th hour and pardoning people like Mark Rich, a convicted criminal. Mark Rich did illegal business with Iran. He profited from a terrorist regime, and he had no business walking the streets. However, former President Bill Clinton, saw fit to pardon him at the 11th hour, and he and his foundation received a bountiful donation as a result. Talk about a kickback. These people are sick, and President Trump is the real deal. And finally, what do we have here? Perhaps another proof coming true, future proving past. The Trump administration has forced China to sell the port of Long Beach. The Trump administration's Department of Homeland Security has forced China's state-owned Costco to sell the port of Long Beach over security concerns. China's Costco Shipping Holdings, which bought out its 75% owned Hong Kong beach-based Orient Overseas International, was forced to sell its Port of Long Beach container terminal ownerships to Pkwy Infrastructure Partners for $1.78 billion. The former administration had no problems with OOCL signing a 40-year lease with the city of Long Beach in 2012 for control of America's second largest and most automated container handling operation. The Sweetheart deal was part of the Middle Harbor Redevelopment Program, a fund of $1.5 billion expansion through 2020. But one of the first major actions of the Trump administration's Department of Homeland Security in March 2017 was issuing a Committee on Foreign Investment in the U.S. national security hold on Costco's acquisition of a former U.S. Navy port facility. China operates 6 of the world's 10 busiest container ports. The Chinese government has also funded the construction and operations of 43 ports in 35 countries under its One Belt and One Road initiative launched 5 years ago, according to China's Ministry of Transport. As part of its efforts to gain asset dominance, China has directed its state-owned companies to exclusively buy products and services from other Chinese state-owned enterprises. As a result, China International Marine Containers Group has become the world's largest maker of shipping containers, and Shanghai Zhenhua Heavy Industries has gained a 70% international market share for port cranes, and now exports to 300 ports in 100 countries. Under the Pkwy acquisition terms, Orient Overseas International will pocket a $1.29 billion profit and still control vessel and rail traffic at the container facilities for the next 20 years. So was this the reason that we were recently shown that picture of the port of Long Beach or the vicinity there around? Who knows? We could have been shown that information for a number of reasons, and I think that the former information that I presented from Tennessee Homesteader still stands firm, but I think that this is another excellent example of perhaps why it could have been shown to us. Here we are, we have America taking control of America yet again. It was very, very dangerous for the former administration to sell off this strategic piece of U.S. infrastructure. And here we have yet another example of America taking back its own business. This is excellent news, you guys, and I just wanted to make sure that I made you aware of it. Well, I think that's all I have for you today. I want to thank everyone for joining me. As always, this has been Red Pill 78. I am the corruption detector, and this was your Red Pill News. Good luck, everyone, and God bless.